So far we've learned how genetic material is stored in the cell or the organism. We talked about genes, chromosomes, DNA, and now we're going to learn how it's passed on to create variation. So if you can, stop the video and copy these vocab words down. Okay, so here I have drawn the genome for a plant. And here are chromosomes. So let's just review. This is a pea plant. Pea plants have 7 chromosomes. And remember, a chromosome is a tightly coiled, so this is really coiled, string of DNA. And on the first chromosome is one of the most famous genes. It's the gene for the color of the pea plant. And that's capital Y for yellow and lowercase y for green. On chromosome 4 is the height, capital T for tall and lowercase t for short. So this is the genome, these are the chromosomes, and on the chromosome, which is made out of DNA, you have the genes. So this pea plant, let's just look at chromosome 1. This pea plant is Y for its color. And this letter representation for this pea plant's genes is called the genotype. So letter representation for the gene. Notice I've made the word red because there's a big hint in this word, genotype. So the genes, the types of genes. So this word can be figured out. So this is the genotype. Now these genes will make it yellow. This is the genotype, and this is the phenotype. And you can see that word's right here. Phenotype is the physical trait you can see. So there's the genes you can't see inside the cells of the plant. You can't see the genes. You can see the physical trait, you can see the yellow. So a genotype and a phenotype. This is the genotype, phenotype. Now, as we go through these words, I want to remind you, as you go forward, you're going to practice these by doing. So you write down the definitions. Notice I have these really easy kind of ways to remember and kind of summary of their definitions. But as you go forward, I want you to say them while you're working with them, and they're going to go into your deeper memory. So the phenotypes of physical traits that you can see, and the genotypes, the genes. Now with the genotyping, it can be much more complex, and there's actually a lot of words to help you describe a genotype. Phenotype is just the trait you're seeing, while the genotype, we have all these words down here that will describe a genotype. So a gene letter for a gene representing a gene can be capitalized or lowercase. If it's capitalized, it's dominant, and if it's lowercase, it's recessive. That's how we describe that. A dominant gene will be expressed, meaning it will turn into a phenotype over a recessive gene. It supersedes the recessive. So in this case, the dominant gene, well, this is the yellow, will be shown over the green, lowercase. So we are talking about a certain type of inheritance called complete dominance. And in this type of inheritance, the dominant gene supersedes the recessive gene. So you never get a blending. You never get a half yellow, half green. You don't get a half tall, half short, kind of a medium height. In this world that we're looking at right now, which is Mendelian genetics, classic genetics, the pea plant has complete dominant inheritance. And that's what we'll mostly be talking about in our unit. As you get to high school, you start to talk about some of the other ways that the genes interact with each other. So if it's recessive, it's weaker, quote unquote, and you'll do it as a lowercase. Now stronger and weaker in parentheses because it's not really true. The y is not weaker than or stronger than the lowercase y. It's just expressed. If the dominant gene is here, it is expressed, and if the recessive gene is here, it is only expressed if the dominant one is not present. So they don't really interact. Now, there's another term to describe the genotype, and these are the two terms, they go together, homozygous or heterozygous. So if we have in our pea plant, if we have this pea plant, capital Y, they are the same, both capital Y. So we call them homozygous. Homo means same, zygous means to combine. Okay, so from the mother and father. Whereas heterozygous means different, and zygous means from mother and father. So in a heterozygous, you would have capital Y, lowercase y. Heterozygous. So capital and a lowercase, so they are different. So homozygous versus heterozygous. So remember, hetero means different, zygous means combined. So homozygous is the same, heterozygous is different. So now let's put it together. They're the same and they're both dominant. So we would describe it with two words, homozygous dominant. This one, and you could put dominant. If it even has one dominant version of the gene, you can call it dominant, but you don't have to, because the heterozygous is always going to have a dominant, so it doesn't really, most people do leave this out. But like I said, most people leave that out. So do this one. What is this one? Can you stop the video and name that? So this is homozygous, because they're the same. Notice they're both lowercase and they're both lowercase y, right? So they're the same. And are they dominant or recessive? Recessive. So this is the general idea of how these words work. We're going to see a lot of examples of these. So we're really looking at now heredity. We've talked about up here, we've talked about how the genes are stored and where they're stored. We're talking now about the relationship and how the traits are passed along and how they create variation.